You open your eyes to the sound of cartwheels grinding against cobblestones. It's Saturday night, September 1st, 1666, and the air in your cramped room above Pudding Lane smells like wood smoke and stale bread. You're a baker's assistant, and tomorrow, Sunday, will be your only rest day this month. But tonight, Thomas Farriner, the king's baker downstairs, is still working. You can hear him shuffling below, raking coals in the oven. The heat rises through the floorboards, making your room uncomfortably warm even as midnight approaches. You roll over, trying to sleep, but something feels wrong. The air is too dry. Your throat scratches when you breathe. Outside your window, London stretches in every direction. A maze of wooden houses pressed so close together that neighbors can shake hands across the street without leaving their windows. Timber frames, thatched roofs, hay stored in alleys. 60,000 homes built like kindling, waiting. You don't know it yet, but in less than 2 hours, a single spark from that oven downstairs will begin the most catastrophic urban fire in English history. 4 days of flames that will devour 13,000 houses, 87 churches, and leave 100,000 people homeless. But right now, in this moment, you're just tired. You're just trying to sleep. The city outside your window is alive with Saturday night energy. Taverns spilling laughter into narrow lanes, watchmen calling the hours, the Thames reflecting 1,000 candle flames from windows across the water. London feels eternal tonight, unshakable. The largest city in England, cramped within its ancient Roman walls, a place where 500,000 souls breathe the same smoky air and never imagine it could all burn away. You finally drift off. Somewhere around 1 in the morning, you wake to shouting. Smoke is seeping through the floorboards now, thick and black. You stumble to your feet, choking, and the heat hits you like a fist. The entire bakery below is engulfed. Flames are already licking up the wooden staircase. You have seconds. You grab nothing, there's no time, and you run. Out the door, down the collapsing stairs, into Pudding Lane where neighbors are screaming and pointing. The fire is spreading impossibly fast, leaping from Farriner's bakery to the Star Inn next door, then to the timber yards behind it where barrels of pitch and oil are stored. Within minutes, the flames find the hay and straw stacked in every alley. Within an hour, 300 houses are burning. The wind is picking up from the east, pushing the fire west toward the heart of the city, and nobody can stop it. You stand in the street, barefoot and coughing, watching your world dissolve into orange chaos. People are running in every direction, pulling carts loaded with whatever they could grab. Silver candlesticks, rolled carpets, caged birds. An old woman sits in the middle of Fish Street Hill, crying, clutching a single boot. The Lord Mayor, Thomas Bloodworth, arrives in his nightgown, surveys the flames, and says words that will haunt London for centuries. A woman could piss it out. Then he goes back to bed. By dawn, he'll realize his mistake, but by then 6 streets will be gone, and the firestorm will be unstoppable. You watch the fire consume Pudding Lane, then Fish Street, then London Bridge itself, the ancient crossing lined with shops and houses that stood for 600 years. The wooden buildings on the bridge catch like torches. People trapped on the bridge leap into the Thames below, and you can't tell if they're screaming from burns or from drowning. If this moment, the calm before the end, chills you, hit subscribe and comment, which forgotten disaster should we live through next? The fire doesn't just burn, it roars. By Sunday afternoon, the wind has grown into a gale, and the flames create their own weather. Superheated air rises so fast it forms a fire whirlwind, a tornado of flame that tears roofs off churches and hurls burning debris across the river. You flee west with thousands of others, a river of humanity clogging every street, every alley, every path out of the old city. You carry nothing. Around you, wealthy merchants are paying boatmen a month's wages to ferry their furniture across the Thames. A man tries to save his collection of books and collapses under the weight. The books burn where they fall. You see St. Paul's Cathedral in the distance, its medieval spire rising above the smoke, and you think, foolishly, that stone walls will hold. But on Tuesday, when the fire reaches St. Paul's, The lead roof melts and pours down the walls like waterfalls of silver. The heat is so intense that the stones themselves crack and explode. The cathedral's vaulted ceiling collapses inward, and 1,000 years of history turns to ash in an afternoon. For 4 days, you live in a nightmare without end. You sleep in Moorfields, the open space north of the city walls, along with 100,000 other refugees. There's no food, no water except what you can beg from the suburbs. Children wander through the camps calling for parents who burned or fled in different directions. At night, the sky glows red from horizon to horizon, and you can read by the light of your burning city from miles away. Samuel Pepys, the famous diarist, buries his wine and his Parmesan cheese in his garden to save them from the flames. King Charles II himself rides through the streets, offering guinea coins to men willing to fight the fire with buckets and axes. But it's not enough. Nothing is enough. The fire only stops when the wind finally dies on Wednesday night, and by then, 4/5 of the walled city is gone. The Great Fire of London burned for 87 hours, 13,200 houses destroyed, 87 parish churches reduced to blackened shells. The Royal Exchange, the center of English commerce, melted into ruins. The Guildhall, where London's government met for 400 years, gutted. Official records claim only 6 people died, but historians know that's a lie. The poor, the homeless, the forgotten, those bodies were never counted. They burned in collapsing tenements or suffocated in cellars where they hid from the flames. Their names are lost, and here's what makes it worse. It was preventable. Completely, utterly preventable. For decades, London had been warned. The city was a fire trap, wooden buildings packed together, no fire breaks, no organized firefighting force. In 1661, just 5 years before the Great Fire, surveyors told the city government that a major fire was inevitable unless they rebuilt in brick and stone. The government did nothing. There was no profit in prevention, no urgency in safety. And when Farriner's oven sparked that Saturday night, when that first ember found its way into the straw, London's negligence turned into London's apocalypse. You stand in the ruins a week later. Pudding Lane is gone. The bakery is gone. The streets you knew are unrecognizable, just scorched earth and twisted metal, the skeletons of churches pointing at the sky like broken fingers. The smell of smoke will hang over London for months, but already something is changing. King Charles issues new building codes, brick and stone only. Streets must be widened, fire breaks required. The city begins to rebuild, and this time, they build it right. Christopher Wren designs the new St. Paul's Cathedral, the one with the famous dome that still stands today. 51 new churches rise from the ashes. London becomes a city of stone, a city that learned its lesson in the hardest way possible. And yet, across the world, the same mistakes keep happening. Cities built too fast, too cheap with safety as an afterthought. Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, Grenfell Tower, Rana Plaza. Different centuries, same story. Negligence dressed up as efficiency. Profit prioritized over people. And when the fire comes, or the collapse, or the flood, it's never the wealthy who pay the price. If these buried stories deserve to be remembered, hit like and share this with someone who needs to see it. The Great Fire of London killed fewer than 10 people according to official records, but it destroyed the lives of 100,000. It wiped out medieval London and forced the birth of the modern city. It proved that disasters aren't acts of God, they're acts of neglect, failures of leadership, and choices made by people who thought they had more time. You survived. But standing in those ruins, watching smoke still rising from cellars 3 days after the flames died, you understand something that will stay with you forever. The things we think are permanent, our homes, our cities, our sense of safety, can vanish in a single night, and the warnings we ignore today become the epitaphs we read tomorrow. What unsinkable thing in your life scares you the most?